Dave Chappelle, Eddie Murphy,
Hmm.
Richard Pryor. I mean, just think about those names for a second.
Oh, yeah, absolute legends.
Right. We are talking about the undisputed Mount Rushmore of American comedy, like generational talents who didn't just entertain us, you know?
Mm.
They fundamentally altered the way we talk, the way we think, and just the way we understand culture as a whole.
They completely reshaped the landscape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if I told you that the architect behind the greatest moments of their careers, like the single creative force fueling these titans, was a man Hollywood ultimately decided was, quote, too black to be famous?
It completely shatters the illusion of the solitary genius, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
Because we love the myth of these superstars standing alone on stage with a microphone, conquering the world purely on their own instincts. But when you pull back the curtain on the 1960s and 70s comedy scene, you find this hidden blueprint. You find this invisible architecture engineered by one guy operating entirely in the shadows.
Which is just wild to think about. So welcome back to another deep dive. Today we are exploring the unfiltered, incredibly chaotic, and fiercely brilliant behind-the-scenes world of American comedy, and our map for this journey today is the 2009 memoir, Black is the New White, by the late Paul Mooney.
Yeah, and we've got extensive excerpts from his book today, including a wildly revealing foreword by Dave Chappelle.
We do. Now, a quick heads up before we jump into the deep end here, because we are going to be talking about some incredibly raw history today.
Very raw. I mean, Mooney's lived experience involves intense racial dynamics, some of the ugliest parts of the entertainment industry, and highly charged, unfiltered street language.
Right, and we're just the messengers here. We aren't taking political sides or, validating the specific viewpoints in the text. We are neutrally unpacking Mooney's reality exactly as he wrote it. Because, and I really believe this, you simply cannot study a cultural revolution by sanitizing the history books.
No, you really can't.
You have to look at the era with the lights all the way on.
Absolutely. And to truly understand the sheer gravity of Paul Mooney, it's actually best to start near the end of his story, looking backward through the lens of the modern giants he influenced.
Oh, that makes sense, like the Chappelle foreword.
Exactly. Chappelle's foreword lays this out perfectly. He talks about growing up in Washington, D.C., absolutely idolizing Pryor and Murphy. To him, they were untouchable gods of comedy.
Practically memorized their albums, right?
He did. And then Chappelle gets into the industry, starts peeking behind the curtain, and discovers this massive industry secret. Paul Mooney was the writer handing his idols their best material.
Wow. That had to be a trip for her.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And Chappelle points to one specific, undeniable cultural earthquake to prove Mooney's invisible influence: the legendary Saturday Night Live word association sketch.
Oh, man. From its very first season in 1975, that sketch is a masterpiece.
It really is.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, Chevy Chase is playing this, smug, corporate white interviewer, and Richard Pryor is the nervous, prospective black employee. And it starts out as a simple, rapid-fire psychological test.
Right. Chase says dog, Pryor says tree.
Exactly. But then Chase starts dropping subtle racial coding, and then it escalates.
It spirals into an incredibly tense, racially charged volley of slurs. And the brilliance of the sketch is the pacing, You watch Pryor's demeanor shift from accommodating to aggressively defensive.
Oh, you could feel the tension through the screen.
Yes. And it culminates with Pryor turning the tables, delivering a completely devastating, untranslatable threat, and Chase suddenly realizing he has pushed way, way too far.
And Chappelle reveals that Paul Mooney wrote that entire sketch.
Which is staggering when you consider what that sketch represented in 1975. I mean, it wasn't just a funny bit on late-night TV. It was a black man on national television holding his own and ultimately winning a battle of verbal and racial escalation against a white man.
Live on air, no less.
Exactly. Chappelle notes that this specific moment changed television history. More intimately, it showed a young Dave Chappelle exactly what was possible. It completely expanded the boundaries of the medium.
And it wasn't just Pryor either. The sources dive into the 1980s, right at the peak of Eddie Murphy's power. We're talking about the Raw tour.
Oh, peak Eddie Murphy.
Right. Eddie Murphy is wearing the purple leather suit. He is the biggest rock star on the planet at this moment. People are paying exorbitant scalper prices just to breathe the same air as him. And who does he choose as his opening act? Paul Mooney.
Which is, I mean, Chappelle actually asks Murphy about this years later. He points out the sheer nerve it took to put Mooney out there. Because Mooney wasn't out there warming up the crowd with light, easy jokes.
No, not at all.
He was delivering heavy, confrontational, philosophically dense material.
So why do it?
Well, Murphy's explanation is the ultimate testament to Mooney. He said that when you have Paul Mooney opening for you, you are forced to be at the absolute top of your game when you step out from behind that curtain. You cannot rely on your fame. You cannot slack off. He essentially used Mooney as a mechanism for his own survival.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It makes me think of, like, an elite athletic trainer working with Hall of Fame athletes.
Yeah.
Imagine a legendary boxer who has won every belt, and they start getting a little comfortable, a little lazy in training camp.
They need a push.
Exactly. Mooney is the guy you bring in to make that boxer run uphill sprints at 5 a.m. in the freezing rain. He pushes the superstars to actually be legendary because they are genuinely terrified of looking soft in front of him.
A standard of ruthless authenticity.
Right.
That is exactly what it was. And Mooney carried that standard into every single room he entered. Look at the Richard Pryor show in 1977 on NBC.
Oh, yeah.
Mooney wasn't just hanging around writing jokes. He was the casting director. He directed segments. He used that platform to launch the careers of people like Robin Williams, Brad Garrett, Tim Reed, and Sandra Brainhard.
Wait, Robin Williams and Brad Garrett. He possessed this, like, supernatural eye for raw talent.
He really did. And of course, jumping forward to the 2000s, Mooney becomes the secret weapon of Chappelle's show.
Oh, the iconic characters.
Right. He creates and stars in these unforgettable characters like Negrodamus and the Ask a Black Dude segments, which were essentially the philosophical backbone of that show's commentary on race.
All of this massive structural influence brings Chappelle to a really devastating conclusion in his foreword. He asks, if Paul Mooney is this brilliant, if he is a comedic genius who reliably delivered the goods for 40 years across multiple generations of superstars, why isn't Paul Mooney a household name?
It's the million-dollar question.
Right. Why isn't he starring in his own blockbuster movies? And Chappelle's answer hits like a ton of bricks. He says you read Mooney's book and the reality becomes crystal clear. Paul Mooney was simply too black for Hollywood.
He just refused to modulate his frequency to make the mainstream comfortable, which is a fascinating concept to carry with us as we dig deeper today. Think about your own favorite pieces of pop culture.
Yeah, the stuff you grew up on.
The movies you quote, the comedy that shapes your worldview. How many of those iconic moments were actually engineered by unseen creators like Mooney, creators who were too raw, too uncompromising for the spotlight, but who fundamentally built the house we all live in?
Okay, so we've established the weight of his legacy. But how does a mastermind like Mooney even connect with a wildly unpredictable generational talent like Richard Pryor in the first place? To figure that out, we have to rewind the tape a bit.
All the way back.
Yes. We're leaving the modern era and dropping right into 1968 Los Angeles.
This is the collision of two completely opposite psychological profiles.
It really is. The book describes their very first meeting, and it is a scene straight out of a movie. It's a crowded party in Mooney's bungalow on Sunset Boulevard. The place is packed with people, music playing, a very late 60s Hollywood vibe. And suddenly, Richard Pryor walks in.
And Mooney's observational skills are razor sharp here. He doesn't just see a famous comedian walking in, he instantly diagnoses Pryor's mental state.
Right, he reads the room.
Exactly. He describes Pryor moving through this chaotic party like a kid in a candy store. Pryor is trailing a date behind him, a woman he essentially forgets exists the second he crosses the threshold, because he is absolutely transfixed by the drugs and the women swirling around the room.
He is a creature of pure appetite. And out of everyone in this packed bungalow, Pryor makes a beeline directly for Paul Mooney.
Yep.
He walks right up to him, and his opening line, like the very first thing he ever says to Mooney, is a proposition for a massive group orgy.
Just right out of the gate.
Right. Pryor wants to get in bed with Mooney, his own date, the women Mooney is hanging out with, just a total free-for-all.
Which immediately introduces a spectacularly dangerous complication.
Oh boy, yes.
One of the women standing next to Mooney at this party is his half-sister, Carol Labrea.
And the text points out that Carol Labrea was not just a random guest. She was a phenomenally striking model. In fact, she was the first black woman ever to appear on the cover of French Vogue. So it makes sense Pryor's radar locked onto her. But he has absolutely no clue she is Mooney's sister.
And in the hyper-masculine, volatile culture of the late 1960s, a stranger walking up and propositioning a man's sister for an orgy is usually the prologue to a brutal fistfight.
Exactly. But Mooney doesn't throw a punch. He just laughs. He looks at this wild, energetic guy and calmly tells him no, there will be no orgy today.
And Pryor's reaction to this rejection is what seals Mooney's fascination with him. Pryor doesn't get aggressive. He doesn't get embarrassed or defensive. The memoir describes Pryor simply sliding away like the iceberg sliding away from the Titanic.
He is completely unbothered. He just floats off into the crowd to ask the next group of people if they want to have an orgy.
And Mooney realizes in that exact moment that Pryor operates with the absolute vulnerability and pure impulse control of a 4-year-old child.
That's such an interesting way to put it.
Right. An infant doesn't scheme. An infant says, I want the toy, so I am going to reach for the toy. If you take it away, they just look for another toy. Mooney recognizes that there is no guile, no hidden malice in Pryor's chaos. And because it's so pure, Mooney finds it impossible to actually hate the guy.
So they end up crossing paths again 2 weeks later. This time, they are backstage at a Trini Lopez concert in West Hollywood. Pryor spots Mooney, and he immediately does this exaggerated, fake cowering routine, putting his hands over his face, yelling, "Don't hit me." Someone had clearly informed him that he had propositioned Mooney's sister.
But watch how Mooney tests him here. Mooney asks him about that night at the bungalow, asks if Pryor ever managed to put his dream orgy together.
And Pryor just shrugs. He looks genuinely confused and says, I must have been high. He has zero memory of the entire night.
This introduces a vital concept that defines Richard Pryor's existence. The text calls it the eternal present.
The eternal present. I like that.
Yeah. Pryor did not carry the baggage of yesterday, and he possessed no anxiety about tomorrow. He lived entirely, intensely, and dangerously in the exact second he was currently occupying.
Okay, so we have the bizarre meet cute,
Mm.
but the professional partnership officially locks into place a little while later, in September of 1968. They are at Duke's coffee shop at the Tropicana Motel. It's the early afternoon. Pryor is severely hungover, trying to revive himself with coffee laced with brandy.
As one does.
Right. And Mooney slides into the booth across from him.
And Mooney decides to test the comedic waters. He casually drops a joke about a beautiful woman he saw walking down the street earlier.
And it is a wildly profane, hyper-vivid piece of street poetry. Mooney basically says this woman was so gorgeous, someone should perform a highly explicit sexual act on her father just to reward the man for a job well done.
It's jarring. It takes a second to process the logic of it, but it's a brilliant subversion of a traditional compliment.
The effect on Pryor is instantaneous. The text says Pryor's face lights up like a Times Square billboard. His hangover completely evaporates. His whole body starts wagging like a happy dog. He absorbs the joke on a cellular level.
And Pryor doesn't just laugh, he immediately monetizes it.
Yes.
Yes.
Later that very night, Mooney goes to the Troubadour to watch Pryor do his stand-up act. And right there on stage, Pryor uses Mooney's exact joke. The crowd's reaction is explosive. The book says the audience practically vomits laughter.
Wow.
It's a total home run. After the show, Pryor walks up to Mooney, tells him to hold out his arm, and straps a massive $10,000 heavyweight gold watch onto Mooney's wrist as payment.
10 grand in 1968.
Exactly. And from that second forward, Pryor calls him Mr. Mooney, like the banker character from the Lucy Show.
That gold watch is the physical manifestation of their new symbiotic bond.
Wait, hold on, though. I need to stop right here because I am genuinely stuck on this dynamic.
Okay, what's up?
Mooney is clearly this incredibly sharp, sober, clear-headed guy. Pryor is a walking tornado who forgets what happened 12 hours ago, asks to sleep with your sister, and drinks brandy in his morning coffee.
Even with the $10,000 watch, why doesn't Mooney just take the jewelry and run?
That's a fair question.
Right. Why willingly attach yourself to a guy who is so obviously a liability?
It's the logical question. Why grab onto a sinking ship? But Mooney's psychological assessment of the situation was much deeper than a cost-benefit analysis of his own career.
Okay.
Mooney explains that his motivations were intensely personal and completely authentic. He didn't care about the gold watches or the Hollywood access. He looked at Richard Pryor and saw a brother.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he felt an intense, almost maternal need to protect that 4-year-old vulnerability from an industry that eats vulnerable people alive.
So it's pure loyalty. Loyalty, but also an acknowledgement of sheer, awe-inspiring genius. Mooney recognized that Pryor was a once-in-a-century conduit for comedy. Mooney said that writing a joke and hearing Richard Pryor laugh at it was like getting a high five from God.
High five from God. That is incredible.
Right. When you realize you possess the exact key that unlocks a generational genius, you don't walk away. You stay in the room no matter how chaotic the room gets.
Okay, that makes sense. Mooney wasn't a hanger-on. He was a guardian of this talent. But to understand why Pryor was so fragile and why they needed to stage a comedic revolution in the first place, we have to look at the immense, soul-crushing pressure being placed on black comedians in the late 1960s.
It was a completely different world.
We really have to look at the pressure to assimilate.
The comedic landscape of 1968 was incredibly rigid, and there was one singular, overwhelming template for success if you were a black comic: Bill Cosby.
Cosby was the gold standard for the mainstream. He had massive hit albums, he was on television, and the book points out that white mainstream audiences considered him the perfect black comic. The buzzword they always used was articulate.
Right, safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His material was completely sanitized. He was doing long observational routines about things like childhood sports or bowling pins.
It was comedy completely decoupled from the massive social upheavals of the 1960s.
Exactly. You have the Vietnam War, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., riots in major cities, and the pinnacle of comedy is a guy talking about a bowling alley.
The contrast is staggering.
It is. And early in his career, Richard Pryor is actively trying to be the next Bill Cosby. He's putting on the suit. He's going on the Ed Sullivan Show. He's playing the big rooms in Vegas. He is literally on stage acting out a physical comedy routine where he pretends to be a bowling pin waiting to get hit.
But the sources make it explicitly clear that performing this safe, sterilized material is causing a deep psychological rot inside Pryor.
Yeah, you can only fake it for so long.
Exactly. Mooney uses a brilliant metaphor. He says Pryor was acting like a kid in a candy store who is actually craving a steak.
Ooh, that's good.
Right. He was getting the quick sugar high of the easy mainstream laughs and the money, but his soul was starving for something real.
This brings up a profound philosophical divide between Paul Mooney and the entire comedy establishment. Mooney introduces this concept he calls the elephant in the room. And that elephant is race in America.
Mooney's foundational belief is that it is structurally impossible to stand on a stage in America, hold a microphone, and not address the racial dynamics of the country.
He paints this incredibly visceral picture in the book. Imagine a literal elephant standing in the middle of a comedy club, spraying diarrhea all over the walls, the tables, the audience, and all the comedians getting on stage are just politely pretending the room doesn't smell.
Ignoring it completely.
Right. They're talking about airplane food while everyone is covered in filth. Mooney says his only instinct is to grab the mic, point, and scream, "Look at the elephant."
To explain the psychology behind why so many comedians chose to ignore the elephant, the book references the sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois and his theory of double consciousness.
Let's really dig into this because this concept seems to drive everything Mooney does.
Absolutely. Du Bois theorized that marginalized people, particularly Black Americans, are forced by society to develop two distinct competing identities just to survive.
Two identities.
Yeah. There's the master identity, the version of yourself you present to the mainstream white society. In this mode, you constantly modulate your behavior, you police your speech, you suppress your true feelings to ensure you never make the majority demographic feel threatened or uncomfortable.
Oh man, that is exhausting.
Beyond exhausting, it's psychologically fracturing. Because then there's your second self, the authentic self, the language, humor, and truth that exists only just between us within the absolute safety of your own community.
And Paul Mooney's entire worldview is built on a flat-out, uncompromising rejection of this double consciousness. He refuses to keep two sets of books for his personality.
He really does.
He has this amazing metaphor in the text. He compares mental assimilation to hair. He says that when Black people chemically straighten or relax their hair, white audiences feel relaxed. But when the hair is natural, when it's nappy, the mainstream gets nervous. Mooney proudly declares that his mind is nappy.
That is so powerful.
Right. He absolutely refuses to run a chemical relaxer through his thoughts just to make a Vegas crowd comfortable.
Which highlights the agonizing, excruciating tension Richard Pryor was experiencing. Pryor was actively trying to maintain that double consciousness. He was trying to play the middle.
Trying to have it both ways.
Exactly. He wanted to keep doing the clean Vegas act for the money and the fame, while simultaneously harboring all this raw, dangerous, street-level reality inside his head.
You can't sustain that. It's like a pressure cooker with a welded-shut release valve.
You can only skate on the surface for so long before the sheer pressure of reality forces the entire thing to explode.
And that explosion happens spectacularly. It brings us to one of the most legendary breaking points in comedy history, the Aladdin Hotel incident. Oh, this is the ultimate collision of these two worlds.
It really is.
Pryor is headlining at the Aladdin in Las Vegas. He is standing at the absolute summit of mainstream success. Dean Martin, like the king of the Rat Pack, the epitome of the establishment, is sitting right there in the front row.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Huge stakes. Pryor starts doing his surefire, clean, Cosby-style routines, and right in the middle of a bit, his brain just short-circuits.
He experiences a profound, slow-motion psychological break on stage. The chasm between the words coming out of his mouth and the truth burning in his chest becomes too wide to jump across.
He stops talking. He stares out at the sea of wealthy, relaxed faces in the Vegas showroom. He leans into the microphone and says, "What the fuck am I doing here?"
Out loud.
Out loud. And he physically walks off the stage. He leaves the money, the fame, the establishment right there in the room.
To understand the gravity of that moment, we have to look at the conversation Pryor has with Mooney afterward. Pryor tries to explain the exact thought that broke him. He tells Mooney that he was looking out at that predominantly white, wealthy Vegas audience, and his mind drifted to his grandmother, who he affectionately called Mama.
And we have to give context to who Mama was. Her name was Marie Bryant, and she was an incredibly tough woman who ran a string of brothels in Peoria, Illinois. She raised Richard in that environment.
Pryor tells Mooney that he looked at those faces laughing at his safe little jokes, and he realized with crystal clarity that those people wouldn't make room for Mama if you put a gun to their heads.
Wow, that is heavy.
It is the ultimate distillation of the marginalized artist's dilemma. Do you abandon your roots? Do you hide your mama? Do you sanitize your history to secure a seat in the corporate boardroom?
Yeah, what do you choose?
Right. Or do you look at that boardroom, realize they despise where you come from, and burn the whole building down to stay true to your blood?
Think about your own life for a second. Think about your workplace or certain social circles. Have you ever felt that pressure? Have you ever had to suppress your accent, hide your cultural background, or bite your tongue on your actual beliefs just to survive in a room that wouldn't make room for Mama? It's a universal friction, but Pryor felt it on a massive public scale.
Pryor walking off that stage was his definitive answer. He chose his roots. But severing that tie to the mainstream, effectively detonating his own career, unleashed a tidal wave of anxiety. He needed to cope with the fallout.
So Pryor shatters this mainstream illusion in Vegas. But where do you go after you burn down your own career? For Pryor, it was straight into the smog and the extreme coping mechanisms of Los Angeles.
This is where we see Mooney's role shift from comedic sounding board to physical protector. We have to examine how Mooney operated as the shadow partner during Pryor's darkest descents.
The book paints this incredibly vivid, claustrophobic picture of a small house party in Venice, right near the beach. Mooney walks in, and he immediately hates the entire environment. The air is practically opaque with dope smoke. There are massive piles of cocaine laid out on the coffee tables. It is a den of total self-destruction.
And Mooney is sober.
Right. Famously, rigidly sober. He turns around to walk right back out the door.
And Pryor spots him leaving, and Pryor's reaction is one of genuine, baffled shock. He looks at Mooney and asks, "Are you a motherfucking Mormon?"
That's hilarious.
Pryor literally cannot compute the idea that someone in his inner circle doesn't rely on chemicals to function.
He's almost offended by the rejection of the lifestyle.
Right.
But then Pryor's twisted logic kicks in. He physically grabs Mooney by the arm, drags him back into the living room, and proudly announces to the room of addicts that his man Mooney is keeping it completely straight.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Then Pryor sits down in front of a mirror covered in cocaine, snorts a terrifyingly massive amount, looks up, and gleefully yells, "I get Paul's share more for me."
He weaponizes Mooney's sobriety to mathematically justify doubling his own fatal intake.
Which brings Mooney to a massive fork in the road. He says he could have easily walked out the door, gone home, and never spoken to Richard Pryor again. But he makes the active, conscious choice to stay in that room.
He commits.
He sinks into the role of the shadow partner. He becomes the designated driver of Pryor's life. He's the straight man, the one guy in the entourage whose eyes are clear, the one who remembers what street the party is on and where the car is parked.
It is a profound level of commitment to another human being.
But wait, let me push back here for a second, because reading this, I got incredibly frustrated with Mooney.
Really? How so?
You're framing him as a protector, a shadow partner. But isn't he just enabling Pryor? I mean, Mooney is a brilliant guy who openly despises drug culture. Why would he willingly choose to sit in a hazy, depressing cocaine den for hours on end watching his friends slowly kill himself? Isn't Mooney just providing the ultimate safety net for Pryor to self-destruct without consequence?
That is a very sharp, very critical perspective, and it's one Mooney actually wrestles with in the text. But if we analyze the deep symbiotic mechanics of their relationship, a much more complex picture emerges.
Okay, I'm listening.
Mooney wasn't just hanging around out of pity. He knew that Pryor possessed a genius that was inherently coupled with chaos. Pryor needed a physical and emotional anchor to the real world simply to survive his own brain.
So Pryor needed a babysitter. What did Mooney get out of it?
Well, Mooney had these revolutionary, explosive ideas about race, hypocrisy, and the elephant in the room. But Mooney wasn't a generational performer. He needed a vessel. He needed a microphone that could broadcast those ideas to millions. By choosing to sit in that smoky room, by enduring the chaos, Mooney secured a front-row seat to the literal evolution of modern comedy. He absorbed the raw, unfiltered data of Pryor's life in the underground counterculture. He stayed because he was fiercely protecting the vessel that held their shared comedic revolution. It was a calculated, albeit painful, trade-off.
Okay, so they survived the drug dens. But they can't invent a new comedic language sitting in a living room in Venice Beach. And they certainly can't do it at the Aladdin. They needed a laboratory. They had to radically change their geography to change their voice.
They had to escape the gravitational pull of the Sunset Strip?
Right. If you look at Los Angeles in the late 60s, the Sunset Strip is essentially the mainstream establishment wearing a leather jacket. It's heavily patrolled by LA County sheriffs, catering to rock acts and predominantly white, affluent audiences at places like the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Very specific vibe.
Very specific. But miles south of the freeway, down in Crenshaw and South Central Los Angeles, an entirely different universe was operating by its own rules.
This is where they found their true incubators. The sources highlight two incredibly vital, culturally significant venues. The first is a club owned by Richard Pryor's ultimate idol, Red Fox.
Red Fox's Jazz Go-Go. Fox was the anti-Cosby. The book describes his club as this wild mixture of stand-up comedy, live jazz, and strippers. But more importantly, the sources dive into Fox's core philosophy regarding profanity.
Because Fox was infamous for working blue.
Yes, but he didn't use four-letter words just for the cheap shock value.
Exactly. Fox viewed profanity not as a degradation of language, but as the ultimate expression of truth.
The text quotes this amazing foundational bit Fox used to do on stage. He would tell the audience that he's too old to stand up there and say childish things like doo-doo. He says, if you think you are above using the word shit, come out to the parking lot with me right now and let me slam a car door on your hand.
It's so visceral.
It is. Fox guarantees that in that moment of blinding pain, you aren't going to scream, oh, bother, or goodness gracious. You are going to scream shit and motherfucker.
Because in a moment of true pain or raw reality, those words are the authentic human reaction.
That philosophy cracked Pryor's mind wide open. It validated his instinct that the language of the street wasn't something to be ashamed of.
And the second incubator the sources explore is a place called Maverick's Flat on Crenshaw Boulevard.
Oh, this place sounds like the coolest room on earth. It was financially backed by the NFL legend Jim Brown and run by a guy named John Daniels. They took an abandoned Arthur Murray dance studio and transformed it into this late-night, heavily funk-decorated haven.
And it represented a fascinating cultural intersection. Maverick's Flat was a private club. They only served Coca-Cola. There was no alcohol allowed.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a safe haven. The Temptations practically lived there. They even wrote the hit song Psychedelic Shack about the club. But it also exerted this massive gravitational pull on white Hollywood hipsters. Huge stars like Steve McQueen and Marlon Brando would travel down to South Central just to soak in the unfiltered culture.
Wow. And it's at Maverick's Flat that Richard Pryor finally, completely sheds the Bill Cosby skin. The text describes him getting on this stage, and he doesn't just change his jokes. He drops the traditional joke format entirely. He starts doing pure, untethered improvisation. He starts channeling the people he knew growing up in Peoria.
The sources provide a brilliant example of this evolution. Pryor improvises an elaborate character of a pompous 1929 preacher. The preacher is testifying to the congregation that he was walking down a dark alleyway and actually met God. He recognized the Lord's magnificent, booming voice calling to him. But then the preacher admits he refused to go deeper into the alley to meet the Creator, just in case it wasn't God, but actually 3 guys waiting with baseball bats to rob him.
It's hilarious. But you notice there is no setup punchline structure there. It's a vignette of survival. It's a character study of a hypocrite trying to stay alive on the street. And it's in these exact clubs that Pryor fully, aggressively reclaims all the slurs, the M-word, the N-word. He completely bulldozes the wall, separating his polished stage persona from his actual reality.
But this massive artistic breakthrough for Pryor presents an immediate existential professional crisis for Paul Mooney.
I was just thinking that. Because if Pryor's up there flying completely without a net, improvising everything, where does that leave Mooney?
He's the joke writer.
Exactly. The text compares this to comedians like George Carlin. Carlin was a genius, but he was a technician. Carlin crafted every single syllable of his act meticulously. Pryor's doing the exact opposite. He's standing on stage, acting as a lightning rod, just letting the energy of the room flow through him. So if Pryor is abandoning traditional joke structures for stream of consciousness character acting, doesn't that make Paul Mooney completely obsolete?
That is the exact terror Mooney feels. He wonders if he has innovated himself out of a job. But as we analyze the environment of Maverick's flat, we see how Mooney's role didn't disappear. It evolved.
How so?
Well, because there were no white mainstream expectations in that room, Pryor could experiment safely. And Mooney realized his job was no longer handing Pryor one-liners. His job was helping Pryor construct entire worldviews.
Oh, I see. He went from laying bricks to designing the whole city.
Precisely. Mooney helped Pryor hone the perspective of those characters. They realized together that the profanity and the street language weren't crutches. They were linguistic tools. They were finally speaking the actual unvarnished language of their environment rather than providing a sanitized, translated version designed not to scare Hollywood. Mooney became the co-author of Pryor's reality.
Which perfectly sets up our final section here, because even as Pryor moves beyond the simple setup punchline, Mooney mounts this passionate, deeply philosophical defense of the classic joke. He refuses to let the concept of the joke die.
Mooney views the joke not as entertainment, but as a crucial technology.
He calls jokes the original internet. I absolutely love this concept. He says a joke spreads through a community exactly like a virus. A street peddler tells a joke to a lady walking in Harlem, and before you can walk 2 blocks, a guy standing outside a wine shop is telling the exact same joke to a crowd of hustlers.
It's a method of rapid, decentralized, peer-to-peer information transfer that the establishment cannot control or censor.
Think of a good joke as a zip file. It's a tightly compressed packet of human truth, cultural observation, and very often deep pain. You tell the joke, and that zip file gets instantly unpacked in the listener's brain through the physical, involuntary act of a laugh. You bypass their defenses entirely.
Mooney illustrates this weaponized power of comedy with a specific historical example. The sources recount a joke passed down through generations about a slave who frees himself using nothing but wit.
Let's hear it.
So the master is complaining bitterly about how ugly his own face is, whining that his face is so hideous it scares the horses. The slave quietly says he knows exactly how to fix the problem. The master, desperate, promises to grant the slave his freedom if he reveals the secret.
And once the promise is made, the slave looks at the master and says, "You can keep your ugly ass at home."
It's a brilliant, subversive piece of folklore. The joke isn't just funny. It's a tactical weapon used by the powerless to momentarily dismantle the oppressor.
But even as Mooney and Pryor are honing these incredible comedic weapons at Maverick's flat, the sources reveal a deep, lingering sickness inside Pryor. It's 1969. On paper, if you look at his resume, Pryor is succeeding wildly. He's making around $50,000 a year.
Big money back then.
Huge. He released an album on Reprise Records called Richard Pryor, which features a track called Super Nigger, a concept about a superhero janitor who can see through solid objects, except for white people. He's even landing massive movie roles, acting alongside John Wayne in the Green Berets.
He has the money, the creative freedom, the underground respect, and yet, internally, he is completely miserable. The text describes him as feeling like a snake violently trying to shed its skin. He is jumpy, excitable, and dangerously restless. He has achieved the dream, and it hasn't fixed whatever is broken deep inside his soul.
This leads to one of the most cinematic, defining moments in the text. It's dawn in Los Angeles. The sun is just coming up. The infamous smog hasn't rolled in to choke the city yet. Pryor and Mooney are sitting in the front seats of Mooney's blue Buick, parked right outside Maverick's flat on what was then Santa Barbara Avenue.
Just the two of them.
Just them. Pryor is sipping Courvoisier out of a paper cup, staring out the window. He turns to Mooney, his eyes completely hollow, and says, "This city is driving me nuts. I'm losing my motherfucking mind."
It's a cry for help. And Mooney, acting as the ultimate shadow partner, prescribes an immediate physical escape. He decides they cannot heal in the geography that is actively suffocating them.
Mooney puts the Buick in gear, and they just drive. They head north up Interstate 5, leaving Los Angeles behind, aiming for Oakland to stay with Mooney's family. And the description of this drive in the memoir is just pure, unadulterated joy. It's a pressure valve finally releasing.
You can just picture it.
Right. They are blasting Motown on the radio, singing along to the Temptations' Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and my girls screaming the lyrics at the top of their lungs with the windows down. They're making up their own ridiculous profane lyrics. It's a deeply necessary healing road trip between two brothers.
And it is precisely on this drive, as the blue Buick barrels toward Mooney's childhood home, that the text flashes back to reveal Paul Mooney's own origin story. Because up until this point, we've marveled at Mooney's fearlessness.
Yeah, nothing phases him.
Right. We've wondered why he isn't intimidated by Hollywood, why he doesn't need drugs, why he can handle Pryor's chaos. To truly understand the architecture of Paul Mooney's mind, we have to trace his life all the way back to his time in the womb.
This is, without a doubt, the most incredible detail in the entire source material. It explains everything. We jump back to 1941. We are in Shreveport, Louisiana, the deep, heavily segregated Jim Crow South. Mooney's mother, Lavoya Ely, is a 16-year-old pregnant teenager. She is riding a downtown bus.
Oh.
Suddenly, the bus driver loses control. The bus violently veers off the road, plunges down an embankment, and rolls over in a horrific crash.
Mooney miraculously survives the trauma in utero, but he describes himself forever after as a bus plunge baby.
A bus plunge baby.
Yeah, he visualizes himself tumbling around in the dark of the womb, violently flipped upside down, with his tiny infant fist raised in a Black Power protest before he was even born.
He jokes that his very first thought, before he even drew his first breath of oxygen, was, hell no.
If we pull together the psychological thesis of this origin story, it is the key that unlocks Paul Mooney. Being a bus plunge baby, surviving that extreme physical violence and chaos before birth into a deeply oppressive Southern reality, literally wired his brain to view the world upside down.
It completely immunized him to fear.
Exactly. If your very existence begins with a violent, chaotic plunge, a bad review in a newspaper doesn't scare you. An angry white executive in a Hollywood boardroom doesn't scare you.
A guy asking to sleep with your sister at a party doesn't scare you.
Precisely. It explains why he never needed cocaine or alcohol to numb himself to the pressure of the industry. His baseline was chaos. And most importantly, it explains why he was the perfect, unbreakable foundation for a fragile genius like Richard Pryor. Mooney was born out of chaos, so Pryor's chaos couldn't shatter him. He could absorb it, process it, and hand it back to Pryor as comedy.
So let's zoom out and look at the skyline we've explored today. We started this journey looking at the towering legacy of Chappelle and Murphy, then wound the clock back to a serendipitous, almost disastrous meeting at a wild Hollywood party fueled by a highly inappropriate proposition.
It's been a wild ride.
It has. We watched these two men, one wildly fragile, one entirely unbreakable, navigate the soul-crushing pressure of a mainstream comedy industry that demanded they hide their true selves just to earn a paycheck. We followed them as they abandoned the safety of Vegas and found salvation and a new, unfiltered voice in the underground late-night clubs of South Central L.A. And finally, we rode shotgun on a healing road trip up the California coast, fueled by Motown, Courvoisier, and an unbreakable brotherly bond forged in the wreckage of a bus plunge.
The core lesson we can extract from Paul Mooney's life and this specific volatile era is that true, lasting artistic revolution requires absolute authenticity. The pressure to assimilate, to smooth out your edges, to hide your mama, to make the mainstream comfortable will always be immense. The gravity pulling you toward conformity never goes away. But the artists who actually change the skyline, the ones who shift the culture permanently, are the ones who adamantly refuse to compromise their foundation.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Think about the media you consume today. The stand-up specials you watch, the shows you stream, the art that genuinely moves you or makes you think differently. We are so conditioned to celebrate the faces on the posters. We applaud the people holding the microphones, the ones standing in the light. But I want you to look closer at the foundation. Who do you think are the Paul Mooneys of your generation? Who are the invisible architects working behind the scenes right now, the ones considered too real, too raw, or too uncompromising for the spotlight, who are actually writing the lines that will define our culture for decades to come?
Because once you learn to spot the steel beams underneath the glass, you will never look at the building the same way again.